Welcome, guys, to the Overtime Show. I'm joined this week again by Joe, myself, Mitchell, who's away on a fire drill. We have a very special guest in Sky Sports NFL Analyst, Jeff Reinebold. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
How you doing, Jeremy? I'm good.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. This week, guys, we're going to be chatting through the NFL playoff picture, as well as looking at the situation with Tua Tagovailoa in Miami, and also talking about the decision to yank Jalen Hurts last night in the fourth quarter of the Philadelphia Eagles game. What does that mean for Doug Peterson and for the Philadelphia Eagles? So we'll start off with the first game of the playoff weekend, which is in the AFC. They'll see us head over to Indianapolis Colts will take on the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills at home in that one. Jeff, is there any potential upset here, or are we likely just to see the Bills go ahead and roll on with what they've been doing?
Well, it's football, and, as they say, on any given Sunday. But right now, the Bills are playing probably better football than anybody in the National Football League. And they believe, really strongly in each other. That Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have done an amazing job of building a culture there. They replaced all but two players in the 3 years they've been there. Jerry Hughes, the rush end that they have, is a holdover from the previous regime. And I think there's one of the tight ends, I think, too. But other than that, they're all new guys. And, he's done a great job of putting his stamp on that thing. Josh Allen has developed under Brian Dable. They brought in some really, really talented receivers. Obviously, Stephon Diggs and is an amazing player. Smoke Brown is a great player. Cole Beasley's, almost I don't know how you cover him in the slot. I really don't. Especially if you're going to play man, he chews people up. So they got two good running backs. The offensive line has gotten better. Defensively, Leslie Frazier's done an outstanding job. They went out and got some guys like Jordan Poyer and, Micah Hyde and guys that, that had an understanding of what, they wanted to get done in Buffalo and had some, ties to the organization in terms of Beane and McDermott. Matt Milano, their weak side inside backer, is maybe as good a coverage backer as there is in the National Football League. And a lot of people don't know about him because he plays in Buffalo, but he's in his contract year and he's going to be a rich man come springtime because he is really, really a good football player.
Yeah, he put up an unbelievable performance against the Patriots on Monday Night Football last week. In terms of the Bills, do they maybe remind you of the Chiefs last year? The offense can put up points very quickly. They're very high octane, very explosive. But the real question comes to the defense is whether or not that's going to be their Achilles heel going into the playoffs.
Well, I think when you look at the two teams, and you start weighing teams in the playoffs, you talk about the three phases of the game and are they complete teams? There's not a team that doesn't have some wart on it. I mean, there's no super team, but I think the Bills and the Chiefs are as close as there is to, a team that functions at a high level all the time in all three phases. Their kicking game is outstanding. The punt return against Miami the other day was the thing that really blew that game open. Their punter is really good. Buffalo is a hard place to kick because of the wind, and they've got a guy that can handle the wind. Their coverage teams are outstanding. They're just a really, really good football team. And people, because they're so proficient and so good on offense, I think people kind of think, well, the defense is the weak spot. But I'm telling you what, you saw that defense yesterday. They got playmakers at every level, and the only place I'd say that, and they're a little bit like Kansas City this way, they can tend to be a little bit soft in the middle of the defense against teams that are physical.
Yeah, and this Colts team, if you're going to say anything about them, they are physical. They have got one of the best offensive lines in football, and they're going to run with Jonathan Taylor, they're going to run the ball at you, and it's not going to be a case of maybe the first 10 attempts, they don't get what they need. They're going to keep doing it over and over and over again. And, just a case of just to keep you honest, keep them playing the run. Do you think we can expect anything from the Colts in this one, or is this pretty much a formality that the Bills probably?
Well, I think Indianapolis go in there and fight. Matt Eberflus has got a really good defense. Their Leonard and that crew of linebackers can all run. DeForest Buckner is he's a first-round draft choice. He's a disruptive inside player. They got Justin Houston on the outside that can pass rush. Their secondary worries me a little bit. They got chewed up in that in the second half of that Pittsburgh game, and they were trying to play a lot of single coverage outside, which I didn't really understand. But Rock Ya-Sin is a holding penalty waiting to happen every time he's in coverage, and that's been a problem. So I think that's an area where there's a big if there's a big advantage to Buffalo, it's in the matchups of how their secondary is going to handle all the. This is so crazy we're talking this way, Jeremy, because Buffalo, the original Buffalo blueprint was play defense, run the ball, like most every defensive head coach's mantra is. But they have now gotten into more 4 and 5 receiver sets, more detached formations, more empty than anybody in football. And so this is a really, really tough animal to defend, especially when you got Josh Allen back there throwing the football.
Yeah, I feel like this year they really handed the keys of the car over to Josh Allen. And then when you look at like the great quarterback coaching relationships, a lot of them are, the head coach does tend to be a bit more defensive. So like Russell Wilson, Pete Carroll, Brady, Belichick, it's a little bit more of just, head coach can focus a little bit more on the defensive side of the ball because he trusts his guy under center. And Josh Allen really has taken a step forward this year and not being able to read the defense, being able to change the plays at the line of scrimmage, and just being a bit more independent, take a lot more responsibility. I think the Colts' biggest weakness going into this one is just Phillip Rivers. I just don't see enough X factor from him this year. And with those lack of dynamic playmakers on the outside for the Colts against that secondary, I think the Colts will have to have a phenomenal day rushing the ball and playing great defense if they're going to go up there and cause an upset. So I'd be surprised if they went up there and beat the Bills.
Well, I tell you what, they're a great storyline. Frank Reich was a backup quarterback to Jim Kelly in his playing days and was the architect of that incredible second half against Houston where they were down, I think, 30 points, and he brought them back and won the football game. So, it'll be personal for Frank too. And I think it's going to be, it's going to be a great football game.
Yeah. Joe, we're going to swing over your way because this will interest you with your Packers. The Rams take on my Seahawks in the second game on Saturday. What way do you see that one going?
Well, I mean, I have contempt for the Seahawks. I'm not a huge fan of the football team, but I mean, my roommate is a huge Rams fan, so he's going to be rooting for the Rams. The Rams, I just feel I don't know. I feel like they have so much potential, but they just can never quite mold it into what they want. And the Seahawks, I think, on any given day, are probably the better team going into this matchup. So I've probably got the Seahawks winning this. How far they're going to go this season, this postseason, I'm not quite sure, but I think this might be the end of the road for the Rams personally.
Yeah. I think when we acquired Carlos Dunlap and Jamal Adams came back, that pass rush really heated up. And since those two have come together, our scoring defense is one of the top 5 in the NFL. Like, it really has improved. The only problem is I look at who we played. Washington doesn't have a great offense. The Jets are very anemic. It's a case of just, I think we've got a good portion of the season that we played well, but it's against bad teams. So it's hard to know what you've been doing. And then against the Rams last week, obviously playing against Goff after he dislocated his thumb, it's going to be interesting because I always think the one team you don't want to play in the playoffs is a divisional opponent because they know you like the back of your hand. Yes, you might know what they're going to do, but if Wolford's under center, like there's very little tape on him in the NFL, so he's a little bit of an unknown quantity. I would like to think we'll beat them anyway, but they've got that many weapons on offense with Cooper Kupp, with Robert Woods, the 2 tight ends. Higbee yesterday had a really good day. Their defense can get after you, and our offensive line at times can be porous. I'd expect to beat them, but I think it's going to be very, very tight. I think a one-score game probably is something like 21-16. I would say something around like that. But
Jeff, something I'd like to ask you about. So last week, for our last episode, we were talking about the MVP race. Mm-hmm. We were talking about that we think that maybe the whole thought of the MVP trophy might have got into Russell's head. And that's why maybe he's not playing as well this season as he might hope. How do you think maybe the MVP race might have affected Russell Wilson this season?
Well, I don't know if I will just say this. One of my ex-players is a director of player development for Seattle, and he and I have talked about Russell Wilson a great deal, and I don't think that's in his makeup, that the pressure of the MVP race or wanting to win an MVP, or I think he's way too focused for that. And I think you saw that the other day in the game in the fourth quarter when he has to make that throw at the end of the game. I mean, he is so locked in and dialed in all the time. I just think he got in a situation where when they couldn't run the football, if you get one dimensional in the National Football League, it's really hard. I mean, it is really hard because they're going to stack the deck against you. And, when you go back and look at these two teams and the games that they've played, it has been an incredible chess match between the coaches. Because in the first game that I broke down, the Rams, I mean, they had Seattle. I mean, it was unbelievable what a great job that Brandon Staley did, dialing up pressures, giving Russell a billion different looks. They move Ramsey around. Sometimes he'd take DK, sometimes he wouldn't. I mean, there were just so much going on. And there's one play, and I diagrammed. I'm going to actually put it out on Twitter. I think I diagrammed it where they brought a blitz, and if you were the Seattle tackle, you had no choice. I mean, you had no chance because no matter what you did was the wrong thing. And it was a great coaching job. Then the last time they played, I thought Pete and Kenny Norton, who's been under fire all year, I thought they did an amazing job of using their personnel because they went into, and I showed it on the broadcast, they went into a front that they hardly ever play in Seattle. And it's the old Chicago Bears 46. And, they kicked the front down and then, and the thing that was really, I thought really good about it was as soon as the Rams went to their 3 tight end stuff, because they love all those tight ends, they jumped into that defense, and they brought KJ Wright down on the edge, and they kicked the front back away, and they played. You can't get to the linebackers, you can't block them all. So then they made the Rams one-dimensional, and Goff's not big. In my opinion, he struggles to beat you when he doesn't have the running game going with it. So then McVay's immediate answer was, okay, get the tight ends off the field, go back to 11 personnel, 1 tight end and 3 wide receivers. And so then Pete and Kenny still got in the front, but they did it a really unique way. They brought in the nickel, took out KJ Wright, and then they used Adams as the nickel backer inside the box because he's such a good tackler. That's actually where he's best, is when he's down low around the box. And, as soon as they took the run away, it was, I mean, I know he busted his thumb, but that game was over before he busted his thumb because they were just pounding Los Angeles. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two coaches handle this week. The 8 ball in this whole deal is Wolford, because I saw this today, guys. Think about this. In the history of history of NFL football, no quarterback has ever thrown for 200 and rushed for over 50 in his debut. Nobody, right? Except John Wolford. And when you remember back to that Seattle game, there were numerous times that Goff got on the edge and he wouldn't run with the football. He wouldn't take it and, run 8 or 9 yards and slide. He wanted to throw it, and, Seattle just knew that, and they said just dared him to, and he wouldn't do it. So his ability to run is a dimension that I think Seattle's going to have to take into account.
Yeah, I know if I'm had a choice between the two, I'd rather play Jared Goff, because I think once you get Jared Goff under fire a little bit, he gets a little bit almost to those eyes in the back of the head, and the clock in his head just seems to speed up a little bit more than it needs to. So I'd rather play Jared Goff than Wolford. I hate quarterbacks, the escapability, like a chance where you think you've got them, then next thing you know, your defense is stretched down the field when they go to the 3 wide receiver look, and then you've got a space of 5-6 yards to pick up a first down. Like, I hate 2-dimensional quarterbacks because they can just do so much damage, especially around this on the fly. But I'd be confident with this team, especially with this pass rush now. Like Jamal Adams is just such a unique safety in what he does. He basically always sits by the linebackers, and he's just it's so hard to predict whether he's going to come down and blitz or he's going to go back in coverage. I think we have enough to beat the Rams. Whether or not we can go further on, I'm not sure. I don't have full trust in that defense yet. But looking at the last game on Saturday, we're going to see the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as some people like to call them, traveling to face the Washington football team. I've seen a couple of guys, Jeff, in America, in particular Nick Wright, have been saying this is one of the worst matchups for the Buccaneers just because of that front seven for Washington is going to come after Tom Brady. And when we see Brady play his worst this year with the Buccaneers, it's when people have gone and got after him. So do Washington have a realistic chance just with that defense really being so brilliant over the season to go and cause the upset?
Well, again, like when you look at the two teams, if you evaluate the two teams and you start at quarterback, you'd say huge advantage, Tampa Bay. Look at receivers, huge advantage, Tampa Bay. Look at offensive line, huge advantage, Tampa Bay. Now go to the defensive side, and it's a little bit of a different story. There are 5 first-round draft choices in that defensive line for Washington, 5 of them, and that's almost unheard of. And so they can do some things, and Jack Del Rio does some nice things when he gets all 5 of them on the field, and he can roll guys through. Everybody talks about Chase Young, and Chase Young will make plays in this game. But the guys that are the ones that are going to have to be great in this game are those 2 big inside tackles. Because if you watch Brady, when he gets kind of off his game is when he's got vertical pressure, when there's stuff in his face. Outside pressure, he'll slide up in the pocket. He's so good at moving around in the pocket and managing the pocket. But historically, what's always hurt him is vertical pressure, inside pressure. So if Allen and those big, knuckle draggers that they got inside at tackle, if they can get push, then it's going to be something, because Ali Marpet's going to have to play his tail off at guard for Tampa Bay. And you don't think about, well, a guard's going to have to play a great game to win. Yeah, he's going to have to play a great game. The center's going to have to play a great game. They're going to have to be really solid up front.
Yeah.
I just don't know if Washington can score enough points. They're so reliant on not turning it over, and like you look at the game, the Eagles game, and the one turnover or 2 turnovers that Smith had almost cost them the game. I mean, because they just don't have the ability to score fast, and that's where I think Tampa has a huge advantage.
Yeah, I think what we're going to see from Jack Del Rio is very similar to a Bill Belichick pass rush. It's going to be 4-man vertical, trying, as you say, make sure if Brady's going to step up in the pocket, you've got Payne and Allen right in his face to try and deflect, cause him problems. I think they can cause some problems, but in terms of scores, I think they're going to need a pick 6. They're going to need something from special teams. They're going to need something really special because they looked so anemic last night on offense against the Eagles. Like, Alex Smith can't move, like, with that calf problem.
Jeremy, can I hop in here?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Mitch.
They've put out the fire in the flat above me, honestly, and my webcam is still out. I just want to say a quick thing on Washington. They haven't scored more than 23 points in, I think, their last 5 weeks, and I think with the shuffling of quarterbacks, I think Alex Smith is ranked 38th. I think he's a feel-good story, and their defense is good. But when it comes to Tampa, it's very possible. Like, Brady's looked old a couple of times, but the way I see it, Tampa's a 2-way team and Washington's a 1-way team. They're just not going to be able to put anything together. And every time I try and give myself that upset feeling, because I just think that could be a really fun game if Washington make the most of it, I just can't see them putting points on the board.
Bro, if you get an upset feeling, just take an Alka-Seltzer.
I was going to take a bet on Sky Bet, but I'll go with the Alka-Seltzer.
It ain't gonna be no upset in this one. And that's hard for me to say because I love Ron Rivera and I really, really respect the job that he did there this year with all of the stuff that he dealt with personally, and a dingbat quarterback and an organization that was just a cesspool. It's pretty impressive what he was able to do. And
What do
you
you
know what? It's interesting, guys, you know, because we're all fans of one team or another or somehow. And, you know, you look at organizations, and right now there's 6 head coaching jobs open in the National Football League and general managers jobs all over the place. And you watch teams that win, that can turn it around, and there's a reason for it. I mean, it's a really clear reason. And you watch teams that continuously suck. I mean, like, how many years has it been since the Cowboys have been to the playoffs and done anything, right? And there's a team that spends all kinds of money, got all these high profile players, yada yada. It's not collecting football cards, guys. It ain't like that. You have to have, well, Buffalo to me is the blueprint that every organization should use. The Redskins are the same way. Now, what's really going to be interesting to the Redskins, to me, Mitchell, is they're going to hire a GM, and they better bring a guy in that's right, absolutely lockstep with Ron Rivera. Because if there's any kind of division, then there's cracks in the wall. And as soon as there are cracks in the wall, you know, it starts to fall.
Yeah.
What's your first move if you're there, Jeff? What do you think that I really respect Ron Rivera. I think there were going to be fits and starts in Carolina, which was not, there's a reason that they changed ownership during his tenure. It was not the cleanest position for him. And so I think he's someone we should like. I think Flores down in Miami, it's the same thing. I think if you have a good coach like that, if you can pair him up, from top to bottom with some people who are in step with him, we'll see good things ahead for those teams. That's why we see teams that they might flutter down for a couple of years, but they always come back to a competitive level because their organization is strong. Yeah. So if the Redskins are going to do that, what's the first move you see from that GM?
Well, I think when you get the GM, first of all, Ron's going to have some say in it because he has football decisions. So, maybe it's Marty Herney, who he had in Carolina because they know each other and had a good relationship. Then Herney got fired and they brought in Gettleman, and Gettleman purged the team. And then they brought Herney back. So I would not be surprised if it was Marty Herney went back there. If he does, I think it'll be a much more of a seamless transition. But what Ron's done in the locker room already, I don't know if you guys saw the comments that Terry McLaurin made after the game about what it's like to be in the same locker room with Alex Smith. And to go on the field with him, you can, by the words that he said, and now this is a receiver, okay? And receivers are, let me just say this. They are predominantly high needs guys, right?
Divas.
You use your word, right?
Yeah.
But they're not the kind of guys that, oftentimes will be vocal about things like what McLaurin was talking about how proud he was to be, in that locker room with all those guys. And how can you not bust your ass when you see Alex Smith after 17 knee up, whatever it was, operations. So there's a thing in that locker room that they've started. Now it's like we're all out in the woods and we got to make a fire and we got one little spark, right? And we got it started, but we better take care of it because it can get blown out real fast too, right? And so that's where I think the Redskins have to go. They've got to continue to build with guys. And what a great quote by Ron Rivera today. I want guys who love to play professional football, not guys who love being professional football players. And what he's saying is he wants guys that love football, not the trappings of what football brings you, the money, the fame, the women, the cars, the houses, the whole deal, right? And so they're on the right track.
Yeah, it's a very almost like New England kind of set up, like, we come in, do your job, essentially, and I thought it was a very smart hire when they brought him in the summer. I thought of all the summer hires last year, I thought Ron Rivera was very unlucky to lose his job in Carolina. He did a great job there. I think this is just a smart hire. He will completely change the culture in the locker room. He'll get that whole thing sorted out and straightened out. But you're right. It is building blocks, and it's going to take some time, because Alex Smith's has been a super story. He's a great locker room guy. But how far can you go with him at quarterback? you're always. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but anytime I watch him get hit, I just wince. I don't want to see that another injury to him. So, but they're on the right track. I mean, they've got something special there. Building in Washington, I think it's just maybe 1 year too early to go too far in the playoffs.
You bring up a good point, Jeremy. And think about this is, everybody's going to start getting excited for the draft now, right? Because if your team's not playing, what do you look forward to, right? I like that. Twitter was ablaze today with Dolphin fans talking about what they should do with the 3rd pick and the 18th pick and all that stuff, which is, I love it, right? I love it because it's football and we're talking football all year long. But when you screw up your 1st round pick, particularly if it's a quarterback, you put your organization way, 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 way behind. So you look at the Redskins or Washington football team, excuse me, and there is a core of really good players there, right? They've got those 5 first-rounders. Their linebackers are outstanding, right? Then you go, that young kid Curl in the secondary is a really, really good player for a rookie. He's an all-rookie kind of player. He'll be a Pro Bowl player. And they've got some guys in the back end that they've gotten from other places that are playing better football than they probably, Ronald Darby hasn't played as good as he's playing right now since he was a rookie in Buffalo. So, but still in this game, in the National Football League, in pro football today, if you don't have a guy that can take the game on his back and make throws for you, it's going to be really, really hard to win a championship. And so that is, to me, another thing that they've got to look after in this offseason. Because again, Alex Smith is a great story, but he's not a guy. I agree with you 100%. He's not a guy that's going to lead them to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, no, we saw that with the Chiefs and all those weapons. But moving on to Sunday, the first AFC game, we've got, I think, the team that has snuck in here, and nobody's really said this in the last month. We've got the Baltimore Ravens at the Tennessee Titans. I think the Baltimore Ravens remind me so much of that Giants team that got in and played all their games on the road and got to the Super Bowl. This Ravens team has so much talent and so many different ways it can cause you danger. I think this is the sneaky team to watch to see if they beat the Titans and beat up on the Titans, because I think they're the team to watch in the playoffs.
But
do you watch college
look
football?
At who they've beat. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Jeremy, you watch college football?
Yeah, I do. Yep.
Okay. Then you know that when you go up against one of the service academies, it is a coach's nightmare. I mean, an absolute nightmare. Because you see an offense that you never see, that you have no way to practice against. You can't mimic it, right? Well, that's what they've done in the National Football League. Because how do you get ready for that run game when you don't have pads on in practice, right?
Yep.
Who are you going to get to be the scout team quarterback that's going to be Jackson? I mean, there's nobody, right? Yeah. So I don't know who the backup quarterback with the Titans is, but I know he's not Lamar Jackson. And so all of that speed and all of the precision of all those blocking schemes and all that motion and all that stuff, you can't get ready for it in 5 days. No way. No way. So this is a team nobody wants to play.
Yeah, and the Titans have they have a pretty poor pass rush anyway. And when we saw RG3 come in at Pittsburgh for Lamar Jackson, he's the closest thing to Lamar Jackson, and it just didn't look the same. Like when you threw in J.K. Dobbins, Ingram, and then you add in Lamar Jackson's rushing yards, and they've got playmakers on the outside as well.
Hollywood Brown, they got some guys that can go. And don't forget about Dez. Dez gives you a big physical receiver.
Yeah, he's been playing well since he came into the active roster. So, everyone's going to sit in Baltimore and go, stop the run game. And then their defense is going to get after you. And their kicker, Justin Tucker's automatic. So, I think if the Titans turn the ball over once or twice, they're beat. This team's not going to give you the ball back. And they're not going to let you score on them. Henry's going to come in and be the game plan. But
I think the one good thing about Tennessee is that they also have a run game. And I know it's completely different. I don't think you can scout it, But I think this game, it's going to be football we might have seen 10, 15 years ago. I hope so anyway. But the Ravens haven't beat anyone good. The only playoff team they've beat in this really strong end of their season is the Browns, and they give up 42 points. Their last 3 victories, we're talking about the Jaguars, the Giants, and the Bengals. So the run game means more in the playoffs, in my opinion, which is a strength of Tennessee. It's why Tennessee played well last year. It's why they beat the Chiefs the year previously. It is important, but I think, one, you're going up another team that's going to help shorten this game, because both of these teams are going to keep it on the ground and shorten this game. And in the air, I would trust Tannehill over Jackson at the moment. So I just don't. I think that they're sneaking in, and they might be stronger, and the run game matters a little bit more in the postseason. But overall, they just haven't put it together against a quality team.
The thing that scares me about Baltimore, I mean, when I say scares me, I'm talking about if I was a Baltimore fan, I would be concerned about. There are times, and I consider Wink Martindale a friend, but there are times that defense just doesn't play. I mean, like you mentioned, they've given up big numbers to some people. Now, Kansas City shredded them, but that's Kansas City.
Yeah.
But they've got to play well on defense. And, Tennessee is Vrabel's Tennessee team reminds me a lot of the Patriot teams. They're not, they're not a sexy team. I'm talking about the early Patriots teams before Brady started airing it out as much. But they run the ball, they tackle well, they can make a few plays. I don't think they can rush the passer. That's a concern. And but I do think they're tough, they're physical. And look at those, look at the weapons that he's got outside. I mean, you take John O. Smith and Davis, and those guys are grown men. And then factor in, a back who was 200 yards from gaining 2,000 and gained like 254. I mean, that guy's unbelievable. I mean, he is unbelievable. If he splits the tackles, you see defensive backs taking poor angles on purpose because they don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah, I think this game is basically both teams don't want to go down, because I think then that's when the weakness is shown, when these teams have to divert away from the run game and start throwing the ball. I think whoever gets maybe a 10-point lead in this probably goes on to win it. But then moving on to the middle game, we've got the Chicago Bears going up to face the Drew Brees New Orleans Saints. The Bears sort of got a little dose of reality against the Packers. They've been scoring a lot of points over the last couple of weeks. Trubisky, all of a sudden, people were like, maybe give him a franchise, maybe keep him for a year. Yeah, no, they got a dose of reality. Joe, you would have watched this one a little bit with the Bears. Do you see anything other than the Saints going ahead and getting the dub here?
Well, I mean, something that I think was quite interesting is they went to overtime last time, I believe. So they've already played and they've already been very physical. The Bears, I mean, Mitchell Trubisky is just like, even though he's doing so well as a starter, I mean, he's been doing so much better than he did last year. And I still don't feel like Trubisky's the guy. The Bears seem to be clutching onto him so that they can't admit they've made a mistake with him, because they don't want to be reminded about Patrick Mahomes. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the Bears and Saints. I think it could be a sneaky game. I think the Saints I think they're definitely favorites. Obviously, they're favorites, but I think the last game was so close, and I think this will be an interesting game, definitely. Probably a bit closer than the other games, in my opinion.
I agree with you, Joe. I think it's going to be closer than people think it's going to be. I think the Saints will win. But, when you look at the Bears, when Montgomery came back, all of a sudden that offense did start to do a few things. He's so critical to their success. And you made a really interesting comment, Joe, and I think whether you thought through it or not, you hit on something that's really important, is that there's a lot of pressure in Chicago on Ryan Pace, because this team he put them together. right? And Chicago's ownership is not an ownership that's going to sit idly by and just squander money, right? So you bring in Foles, you pay him all that money, you put him in, inject him as a starter when you got a winning record. And I think you lost 4 straight, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was not good.
And they were horrendous on offense.
Mm-hmm.
So then you bring Trubisky back, who was Pace's guy, because Nagy and the coaches wanted Foles because they had experience with him, right? So there's a lot of intrigue, if you will, in Chicago. And then you look at the other side of the football, and they have gone away from the things that made that defense when Fangio was there. All the interesting stuff that, now again, I know they lost Leonard Floyd, but they've got guys, and you've got an incredible chess piece in Mac, and they really don't take advantage of it. Like when you watch other teams play, if they've got a great player, like you watch Donald with the Rams, they're going to get him in pass rush situations. They're going to get him on whoever is the weakest offensive lineman. For the Bears, not so much. It's kind of, he's always outside, and you fan the protection to him or chip him or whatever. So I think the Saints will win this by 10 or 12. A lot's going to have to do with some of these COVID guys too, because I think Kamara will be able to play if he tests negative, right? Cooper Kupp, same deal. Is he going to be able to play? And this COVID thing, it's the wild, it's a wild card. You just don't know. I mean, Christ Almighty, Montgomery was playing running back the other night, and Taysom Hill, because they lost their entire running back room. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I think you made a good point about the Bears. With someone like Khalil Mack, I don't think they do the best job in getting their best players in the game sometimes. Like Mack isn't being utilized best. Robinson yesterday, no catches at all. Like he's your number one receiver. You got to try and scheme these guys, get them into your game plan somehow. Like they are your X factor guys, and the guys are going to make plays. But moving on to the final game, and after 17 years, the Cleveland Browns are back in the playoffs. They got their divisional matchup against the Steelers, and I'm going to go to Mitchell on this one. Mitchell, to me, this is the most interesting one of them all, because I'm so interested to see this Cleveland team against Pittsburgh now for the 3rd time this year.
I think this one might be the least predictable because Pittsburgh has obviously not been playing well. I think in general they weren't really tested, and now there's just question marks all over the place. I think there's a little bit of an underdog mentality to the Browns that I hope comes through. I think it's odd that they've waited 17 years. You see these teams who have this history of going out in the first round of the playoffs and must be so frustrated. But in this one, I don't know if you really know what you're going to get. I would actually, frankly, put money on Cleveland at this point. The only advantage I would say to Pittsburgh is sometimes in a matchup that is really random, I like to take the quarterback who knows what he's doing. And so even though Ben Roethlisberger has not been special this year, he is the man with all the experience in the world compared to Cleveland. I'm not a big fan of Cleveland's coaching staff. So, yeah, but I guess I've already told you I would actually take Cleveland in this one, but I might live to regret that. But I'd put that on Ben Roethlisberger if I'm making a selection between those two teams.
Yeah, I mean, just going to you, Jeff. I mean, I think we see the best of Baker Mayfield when he is the underdog, and when he's got that real chip on his shoulder, that bulletin board material. I think that's when the best of Baker comes out. But this is the playoffs. The heat gets ratcheted up a little bit more. Are we going to see the best of Baker, or is he going to slide out?
Well, I don't know if you guys caught it, but I broke his game down on the telestrator before our show the other night, and what I saw from the Pittsburgh game previous to this last month is tremendous growth, right? To me, the whole thing for Baker comes down to this: stay out of 3rd and long. You've got to stay ahead of the chains, because when he has to, he's like a lot of those guys that are learning to go from a college system at Oklahoma where it was a one-read system right, into full field reads. And, I can't describe to you guys how much more complex the coverages that he sees in the NFL are compared to what he saw in the Big 12. In the Big 12, you saw cover 3, cover 4, cover 2, and cover 1, and that's it, right? Now he's got all kind of zone exchanges. I mean, he got fooled so badly the first time these teams played, and it was, he threw the pick to Minka over the middle that Minka took back for a touchdown, and he was struggling. Now, if they can get Chubb going, right, and their screen game is going to be a big part of this too, because the Pittsburgh's what? They're a big pressure team. They blitz probably as much as 4 or 5 other teams in the league, maybe blitz more than they do. They're really blitz heavy, right? That's their identity. So how do you stop those kind of teams? Well, you screen them to death. And, they've got a back that's dynamic out of the backfield too. So I think it's really, really going to be interesting to see how much Stefanski plays 11 personnel, because if he plays all those tight ends, which he loves to do, the Steelers are going to put Alu in there, Tuitt in there, and Hayward in there, and they're going to have a hard time running the ball, right?
Yeah.
If they go to 11, they'll take Alu out and put a nickel in the game, and now I think they'll run the ball better. But, we'll see.
Yeah.
I just think I don't like Pittsburgh it's not that I don't like Pittsburgh. God, Christ, I have all kinds of Steeler fans on my ass. But what I'm saying is I don't like, they're kind of an ugly team. You know what I mean? They win ugly. It's like their offense, everything is hard work. I mean, it's like it's all hard work. And, Villanueva it's interesting because you saw in the game the other night, when people get up underneath his pads, when they get, he's 6'9". The kid, this is an amazing story. That kid went to Army and was a wide receiver in college, right? And then he went into service and came back out and grew, and now he's a left tackle. He's got great feet and he's an athlete. But boy, I tell you what, if you get up in his pads, you can pitch. I mean, you can forklift him right to the quarterback. So they got to protect Ben, because Ben ain't moving, right? I mean, he's the statue outside the stadium of Mr. Rooney might move better than Ben. So that's going to be the challenge,
Yeah.
It's going to be a physical game too. I think it's going to be a great, great atmosphere.
Yeah. I just look at Pittsburgh and the absence of a run game and almost trying to get those quick slant routes to sort of substitute the run game. I just sit and look at that and go, if you can't run the ball in the playoffs and you can't keep defenses honest, you really are just asking for them. Especially as you have a Big Ben, he's not moving anywhere. And when you've got Myles Garrett coming at you from one side, Ogunjobi coming from the other, they are going to cause Big Ben problems. Whether or not it's because it's the third time they've met each other, so they kind of know what each other are going to do. I'd be almost inclined to be like Mitchell, just trust Big Ben because he's been there before.
Yeah.
Cleveland.
I think too, I don't know if you guys caught this the other day in the game. I was sitting there watching the game on the couch with Sean, right? And sometimes I wish that they would just let the camera roll and while we're just sitting there watching the game, right? And I said to Sean, I said, Pittsburgh's got the Brown 39 check in. And Sean looked at me like, what? I said, yeah, the Brown 39 check. Because I don't know who the DB was, number 39, the little corner that they put in there. Man, they went after him every down. They tried to get Claypool on him and just throw jump balls. And if that kid's going to play, he better show up because Pittsburgh has already zeroed in on him.
Yeah. I'm like Mitch as well. This is going to be the toughest one to call because I think Cleveland's got the most talent between the two teams. I think when you've stacked them all up, but Pittsburgh's been there before. Mike Tomlin's been there before. He's a very good head coach. I think it's going to come down to Baker Mayfield. I think if he keeps his head, that run game keeps him in short distance yardage, medium at best, keeps the chains moving, keeps converting on third down. I think they'll be I think they could go in there and cause the upset, but I just think that Steeler defense is going to get to him once or twice, and he's going to throw a couple of loose passes.
I agree, Jeremy. He can't turn the ball over, because if he turns the ball over, they'll lose the game.
And sometimes I think watching Baker, he thinks he's a little bit more athletic than he is. When he tries to roll outside the pocket, it's always to his right. And I just think better head coaches and defenses are going to click onto that and try and get him just to try and make those mistakes, get that clock going off his head a little bit quicker. And that defense.
You know who lines up to his right, don't you?
Yeah.
TJ.
And he's going to come
2.5 sacks worth of TJ.
Yeah.
He's going to come after him.
Hey, guys, I got 5 minutes.
We'll do one last topic, then we'll go on to Doug Peterson last night, yanking Jalen Hurts in the fourth quarter. I couldn't understand it. I looked at it and went, I feel like I'm watching the NBA, just watching teams tank. But I couldn't make sense of it. Did you make any sense of it at all?
Let me tell you this. Doug Peterson was my quarterback in 1995. And when he was a high school coach in Shreveport, Louisiana, I used to recruit his high school. So I know Doug real well. And I could not, for the life of me, understand what was going on last night. And to be real honest with you guys, the whole thing this year has been perplexing to me. There is something in Philadelphia that needs to get fixed. There's some sort of disconnect somewhere, because you go out, convince me how this is smart. You go out and guarantee, I think, $180 million or some crazy thing like that to your quarterback. Then in the second round of the draft, you've got an aging football team that has no real weapons outside. You just played the season before with a bunch of practice roster guys, and you draft a quarterback in the second round. Now, I don't get that, right? So now, what are you going to do with both those guys? So then Wentz doesn't play well, and you make the change and go to Hurts, and Hurts gives you a little juice, but in a game at the end of the season where there is I agree with what Chris Collinsworth said. There's no reason to put whatever that other guy's name is in there.
Nate Sudfeld.
Yeah, there's no reason. Nate Sudfeld is not going to show you anything in a quarter of football that Nate Sudfeld will be a third quarterback the rest of his career in the National Football League. That's not disrespectful to Nate Sudfeld, but that's who he is. If Hurts is going to be your guy, then he has to play through that situation. Remember, guys, when he turned down the field goal, right, went for it on 4th and 4, I was like dumbfounded, right? There's a whole quarter, I think a quarter and a third left to play. Why would you go for it in that situation?
Yeah.
Well, and Chris Long has implied that this might be going over Peterson's head, because when is the last time we were so excited about a coach?
That's what I'm thinking, Mitch.
The world loves Doug Peterson. The way that everyone has turned on him this season, something is really messed up there, because you can't get rid of Wentz's contract at this point. He wants to go. Who can afford that when he looked terrible? He looked great when they paid him. And you have to pay quarterbacks these days, but they're going to be a little bit lost now. And it's a pity. I think Doug might do with a change of scenery. I think that's what Ron Rivera needed. And if he really gets another chance, I think that'd be a mistake. I think Philadelphia's got issues above him.
Well, I'm going to say this. Doug Peterson's a good person, right? I know that for a fact. And he's a guy that is a character guy. I mean, he's not going to, this whole thing just is it stinks, right? You got a quarterback making $180 million that basically says he doesn't want to play in the last game. So what's that? You quit on your teammates, right? Now, then today, he refuses to speak to the media. Grow up. Grow up. You're making $180 million. It's your responsibility to speak to the media, right? So there's stuff that needs to get fixed in Philadelphia. And maybe, Mitchell, and I hate to say this, because I like Doug and he's my guy, but maybe he would be better with a change of scenery.
Yeah. I just get the feeling, and you're right, Jeff, I get the feeling there is something going on in Philadelphia that we just haven't been told about. Like how Harry Roseman gives the contract to Carson Wentz, that massive contract, then 1 year later passes on Justin Jefferson, doesn't make a move on CD Lamb, and just instead goes, yeah, we'll take Jalen Hurts in the second round. There's something going on there that I don't think we know the full picture about yet.
Well, they couldn't have known Wentz was going to play this bad and do all that. That it's just it's perplexing.
I know, and there's a lot of factors, right? Because here's the thing, guys. Continuity is so important in pro football. It really, really is. Now, we're getting away from that. Now it's kind of like guys come in for a year, you fire them, you move another guy. I mean, that's kind of the deal. But right now, I go back to when I sat with Coach Groh, who was the receiver coach with the Eagles the year they won the Super Bowl. Then the next year, there was another receiver coach in there, Carson Walsh. And then this year, there was another receiver coach in there. And now I hear there's going to be shakeups on the staff again. Think about the players, right? Because you can say, if the four of us were sitting in a room and somebody said, okay, say or describe blue, right? And it might be light blue. Mine might be light blue, and Joe's might be navy blue, and yours, it's all blue, but it's different shades, right? And so communication and messaging is so important. And when you keep shuffling guys through, how do the play? I mean, think about the player who's receiving the messaging, right? That's not a recipe for success.
I think Carson Wentz just hasn't been the same since Frank Reich left. And I think Indianapolis is one of the very few spots he could end up, especially with Phillip Rivers potentially retiring. But that's all we got time for, guys. Jeff, thanks so much for coming on and giving us your insight. We really appreciate it here at the
guys. It's my pleasure, man. Let's keep this up. Hey, you know what? You guys get a chance. We do a little show every Tuesday night at 8 called Coffee with Coach. And it's just we get on Periscope and Twitter and just talk ball for like an hour. So if you guys want to come on in and definitely hit me with this. When are you guys going to put this out?
I'll try and get it edited by next week. And
when you get it up, send me your JPEG and I'll pump it for you.
Yeah, it should be up probably no later than Thursday, I would say, just in time for the playoffs. Come on.
Oh yes, it's Monday. Oh, I keep losing track of what day it is. It's Monday. Yeah, this week.
I'll talk to you.
Yeah.
All right. Cheers, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you.